Good morning. It is 8:40 a.m. on Sunday, July 19th, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis. Excuse me, and I just had to burp. This is 5 more minutes. Uh, Today is Sunday, so of course I am continuing my rewatch of The Legend of Korra with Season 2, Episode 4, Civil Wars Part 2. Rocket starts chewing on one of his loud toys right away. A lot going on in this episode, and I tell you, although there are a couple of parts that don't 100% land for me, um, I will say that this episode features a tremendous relief, which is to say, we finally get Korra out from under Unalaq's thumb. Watching this obviously evil character manipulate her for the season so far has been less than 100% fun. And so to have that finally revealed and, like he's still a bad guy, still has to be dealt with, but no longer able to manipulate Korra in the way he was before, that's a relief. So, because we have, again, still the two parallel plot lines of Tenzin and Korra, let's talk about Tenzin first, because comparatively it's a lot simpler over there, because basically all that happens is that Tenzin finally finds Iki, who had found a cave where there's a bunch of baby flying bison, and she had named them in sequence: Blueberry Spice Head, Princess Rainbow, Twinkle Star Child, and Juniper Lightning Bug. And had basically declared them to be her new brothers and sisters. And so when Tenzin shows up, he is allowed to also join this new little pseudo family. And I think it's interesting and kind of sweet that he doesn't just immediately say, well, like, not only does he not even make a big deal about how she ran away and worried everyone, but, like, he doesn't even say, okay, let's get back. He waits for her to be ready. And I think that's actually really cool. Like, part of it, of course, is that he's annoyed with his own siblings. And so the idea of hiding away from the people that you're having conflict with, appeals. But it's also just sweet as a dad that he kind of supports and gives Iki time to come to the right conclusion herself that they should get back. I think that's really nice. And it's kind of sweet, they just talk about, you know, and again, having them really have that mutual understanding of, she thinks we should invite Kaya and Boomy to come and play with us. And Tenzin's like, oh, but we don't want to do that. And, but Iki's saying, oh, but Boomy's so funny and Kaya is really nice and sweet. And Tenzin is just like, well, Milo is really funny and Jinora is nice and sweet. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, being part of a family is really hard sometimes, isn't it? Yeah, and it's like, it's not earth-shattering, but it's nice. It's sweet. And so eventually they come to the conclusion, you know what? It's important to have your family because even though you might fight with them sometimes, they have your back generally, and they all decide to go back. And we also have, so we have the kids apologize to each other, and then we also have Kaya and Boomy and Tenzin all kind of mutually apologize to that, Tenzin basically says, I'm sorry that I kind of let my own memories try to shape what your memories were, which isn't fair. And sorry for not realizing that you weren't always included in some of those things. And they apologize too for saying, just because we were sometimes frustrated or hurt, you know, by by dad, doesn't mean that we have to put that on you. It's not your fault. And again, it's left to, we leave it too as just kind of a reassurance. First of all, nobody's saying Aang is a bad dad and he's therefore a bad person, but it's like we talked about last week. He had a lot going on. Something's got to give, and what had to give in this context was maybe he didn't spend as much time as would have been nicer, like as much time as Kaya and Bumi would have liked, but he did that at the cost of having to help try to make the world a better place. And it's like, well, can't do it all. And so, but knowing that, he tried his best, everyone's trying their best, doesn't always work, but that's why there is a T-shirt that I have. Never mind about that. But in any case, so like that's all kind of resolved in this episode, and honestly, there's not a lot of like it's all emotional stakes, but we resolve it pretty quickly. So let's get back to Korra. So we left off last episode with the cliffhanger that despite the fact that Korra's parents were not involved in the attack on Unalaq, they're being arrested because the rebel meeting took place at their house, even though essentially what they said at that meeting was, no, we should not do that. And so at this point, Unalaq is really pushing it with Korra, because she's at this point of saying, you're acting like you're not in charge of this. You're acting, oh, well, they must be put on trial, but don't worry, I'll make sure that it's a very fair judge. And it's like, but what are we talking about? Like, it's not like there's some higher authority that we need to make sure we impress or do it right. And, Korra is just saying, like, you and I are standing here talking about your brother and his wife. Why do we pretend we need to find out but he is continuing to just manipulate her with this image he's projecting for her of what it means to be the Avatar, and you have to be neutral, and neutral apparently means doing what I say and not what you want. And that's actually some of the genius of Unalaq's gaslighting here, is his ability to make it sound like doing whatever he says is actually being neutral. Because it's saying, I know you want to do something else, but you should do what I say instead, because that's how you stay neutral. So it's actually relatively good writing in that sense, but I think what maybe frustrated a lot of people in this season is it's just like it's sort of well-crafted gaslighting, but it's still not fun to watch happen. So, in any event, we have this trial with the very fair judge, where it's ruled that Korra's mother is innocent and is free to go, but Korra's father is guilty of treason with all of the others and is going to be put to death. And then Korra, she objects, but not even just in sort of a subtle way, but she literally says to the judge in the courtroom, if you take their lives, I'll take yours, which is pretty aggressive, frankly. And honestly, I think part of the only reason that isn't made a bigger deal of is that the whole thing is a sham. So, like, this idea that, oh, I'm going to sentence them to death, but then, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll agree instead to just have them be sentenced to life in prison, and that at the intercession of Unalaq persuading the judge that to show mercy. Like, again, it's that gaslighting. It is that manipulation of Korra, where the whole thing is designed to say, I need to get my brother completely out of the way, out of the picture. but I need Korra to not hate me for it. So I'm going to make it this big deal, like it's actually me that makes sure he isn't executed. Um, and I think it's interesting that this is actually the scene where Korra starts doing her own thing against Unalaq too, because we may be suspicious a little bit that she agrees even to this lesser sentence of life in prison, but we discover soon after she literally only agreed because she plans to immediately break him out. So, like, she agrees to that because at least, you know, having them not be executed buys time. But uh, you know, in this very next scene where she goes and she and her mother go to talk to her father in prison, he's like, "All right, we're gonna break you out, right?" But he advises she not do anything rash because his concern, which is probably a realistic concern, is we can't have this just turn into a war, a civil war, because we'll lose. Um, and on the one hand, you can certainly see where he's coming from, but on the other hand, it's kind of already there. It's just that your side isn't fighting back yet. So, but you know, it's as it becomes later in the episode. It's they need to do something other than just try to fight back. And so it's interesting, I think, that Korra promises her dad not to do anything rash. But then it only takes one brief scene of seeing her mother cry, and what she does is chase down the judge on Naga and basically threaten him into, wreck his car and then threaten his life so that he reveals the truth of everything. And again, it's like this relief valve opening up when we finally learn the truth, and then Korra learns the truth, and so we realize she's not going to be manipulated anymore. But on the other hand, I'm just going to go ahead and say, like, in the commentary for the episode, they literally admit that the interrogation of the judge there is kind of inspired by 24. And I'm going to just go ahead and say, I think it's maybe not great to have the truth get revealed because of essentially torture. I don't think it's great when it happens with Jack Bauer. I don't think it's great that it happens with Korra. On the one hand, I do kind of like that it comes from, because it can be one of her faults that she acts recklessly. But on the other hand, I kind of like that a reckless act is what finally gets the truth out, because, of course, that's how Unalaq was manipulating her, is by saying, we all know that you need to think about what you're doing and be neutral and calm and chill and not make these reckless actions. And I kind of like that breaking out of that is good. I don't like as much that what that reckless act is threatening the life of a helpless old man until he tells you the truth about everything. Because again, as in real life, the problem with that sort of aggressive interrogation is like, well, how does she know that he's telling the truth then, and not just telling her, making something up so that she will leave him alone and he can get away? I don't want to make too big a point of that. I guess I just sort of feel like I don't really like that it ends up conflating the lesson with this government official that she's not aware, like she doesn't know that the trial was a sham. She just didn't like how it turned out. And so she threatens the judge's life. Like, I'm not sure that's a great lesson anyway. But it turns out in the story, like the story supports her and makes it seem like that was the right thing to do, which again, like, I think that's ultimately the problem. The idea of, would Korra resort to that? Yeah, maybe, but I don't really like the story implying to us that was, oh, it's good that she did that because now we know. But regardless, what do we learn? Well, we learn, first of all, like what I said already, that the whole trial was a sham. But further, we learn that it was also Unalaq that got her dad banished in the first place. So this discovery that her dad had been careless about spirits and gotten himself banished back in the day, um, first of all, is actually still true. Like, just because he was set up doesn't mean he didn't do it. Like, he still did attack to get those barbarians, even though it destroyed this spirit forest, right? Like, he still did that. That wasn't untrue. Just because he was set up, like, because Unalaq paid the barbarians to attack and then flee to that spot. But of course, obviously the context is larger, of just in the sense that, even if maybe her father didn't do 100% the right thing, being baited into that by the guy who's now in charge maybe makes you think that, like, yeah, well, maybe he shouldn't be in charge either, right? So, um, yeah, so it's, yeah. So the time has come to break Korra's father out of prison, and because they're so outnumbered and outgunned by the Northern Water Tribe forces, it's basically break him out and then run. Um, but it's interesting that Korra does still seem to be slightly in, like, it's a little bit confused, because like later when they're breaking Korra's dad out and Unalaq confronts them, she's like, "You still need me to open the northern portal," which he says, "No, I don't. You've served your purpose," which is a little confusing to us, because we're like, "But how though?" Like, that's weird. That's a surprising answer. But also, like, she's still planning to do that for him. I mean, it's unclear to me, like, what was she thinking was going to happen? Like, she's going to break her dad out of prison and let him get away, and then stay and hang out while he continues to rule, and help him continue to do the things that he said he wanted to do. Like, I don't know. It's a little confusing. Um, I think, but in any event, it comes to blows. He is. I think it's actually kind of neat that he is an exceptionally skilled waterbender, but with both Korra and Mako throwing everything they've got at him, it's the airbending attack that topples him, because of course, like, most benders wouldn't have been able to train against an airbender, because there's just not enough to go around. Um, but yeah, so she basically knocks him down, and they're able to escape. But as they're escaping, um, we'll cover more of the action sequence in a moment. But learning that the basic plan here is, there's still too many of them. We can't just make it a civil war now. We need help. We need to get the Republic forces on our side. Which, is, again, that's maybe a big ask, right? Because we can imagine, why are the Republic forces, like, is this an internal thing? Is it their job to mediate this sort of thing? It's unclear. It's politics at that point, right? But so in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about the whole Varric and Bolin and all of that nonsense, which supplies the mechanism for the rescue and the escape, but also a lot of comic relief, some of which lands splendidly, and some of it maybe not as much. For one, let's talk a little bit more about Bolin and Eska. I feel like it's interesting to have that whole plot line continue to escalate beyond the point of, like, a normal parallel where someone is just, bad at being honest and isn't willing to have the hard conversation, but to have it literally start to be more assertive. Like he tries to have the honest breakup with her, and she insists, no, not only are we not breaking up, but we're going to get married, and here I'm putting this collar on you, and now I'm going to make you up in Water Tribe clothes, and you're going to come with me, and just have that kind of start to escalate to an extreme degree. But then we also have Varric's involvement here. Obviously, Varric's in hiding too because he was part of this rebel plot. And all of this business of him hiding inside the platypus bear with Julie also in there. There's some just like it's very silly, like outside the normal tone, I think, and reality basis of the show. But it's so silly and funny, and all that stuff I think really lands for me. Like this whole business of we see his head in the mouth of the platypus bear, and then Julie hands him a steaming cup of tea, which he drinks, and then the whole business of he spits it out because there's no honey. Why is there no honey? There's no honey because we're inside a platypus bear, and he's like, but it's a platypus bear, like implying, well, platypus bears like honey, right? So there should be some inside this stuffed platypus bear, and to be mad about that is just, it's ridiculous. And then pooping the money out of the butt is like, it's all just very silly. But that stuff really works for me. It doesn't work for me as much the idea that he gives Bolin a bunch of money to bribe the judge to try to sway the trial, but then he just gives it to these two random guys. Like, Bolin's not that dumb, right? I mean, he's not like the sharpest character on the show, but I mean, he's not so stupid as to really just find two rando characters and say, take care of it, here's a stack of money. Like, and then to immediately see the judge and say, oh, I should have bribed that guy. And then it's like, obviously. He's like, well, yes, obviously. Obviously. So that part doesn't land as much. But then, of course, we have Varric's got his really fast boat. And I love, actually, that his advice to Bolin at the beginning of the episode is, you made a big mistake trying to just have an honest conversation. What you should have done instead is to just disappear and run away, like I do. And implying that he has a very fast boat for that purpose. And then to have that come around again at the end, where, they're all escaping on the boat, and then we see Eska looking, frankly, terrifying, her eye makeup all streaking down, furious, her hair a mess, streaking toward them on the ocean. But then the boat is like, yeah, why do you think I built such a fast boat? Gets away, and I thought that was actually really funny. But yeah, so now let's talk a little bit about the action sequence. We get the plane, we get some cool stuff about Mako and Korra using firebending to help the plane piloted by Asami take off with no runway. And then Korra uses the waterbending avatar mode to break the ship blockade so they can get out. And then fighting off the guards on the ship to rescue her dad and the other prisoners. And, like, all of that's, like, I don't think we have to get into the ins and outs of it. I think that's some good stuff. I think the whole just business of having the boat has this special little hangar that the plane sits in, that, and can lift out, but there's no runway. And then making, like, a joke of, why didn't, Julie, take a note, why build a runway? But like, it again, just like, Varric is kind of a silly character, but again, that just feels like, how did he think it was supposed to work? So some of those are like silly at the expense of the character's intelligence, which, in the world of improv, one of the guidelines that they really encourage is play to the top of your intelligence. Don't try to have the joke just be, gosh, I'm sure dumb. try to have it be silly for some other reason. And so, like, I think some of those, but you know, setting up, you know, obviously, I think what they wanted was to set up this idea of using the firebending to launch, and that was pretty cool. So. So we have the big rescue. We have Unalaq's machinations revealed. We're off to try to recruit the Republic City forces in order to help the war, and we, you know, that's where we leave. So next week, Peacekeepers is the next episode. So we'll be back next week to talk about that. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.